Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last garden hour of May. Our first month together has really flown by. I kind of can't believe it's already May 31st. We just came back from the Memorial Day weekend. I'm going to go through and introduce everybody. Welcome again. My name is Amanda Bachman. I'm the Pesticide Education and Urban Entomology Field Specialist for SDSU Extension. I am joined tonight by Dr. John Ball and by Dr. Rhoda Burrows. John, what are you going to be talking to us about tonight?
Well, tonight go through where we are with the season, and we're still a little behind, as well as some of the common pest problems we're seeing. And then my teaser, a real cool plant you may want to be planting. So that's at the end of my session.
Awesome. Rhoda, what are you sharing with us tonight?
I'm going to talk a little bit about some herbs you may be wanting to harvest quite soon. And also I'm going to talk about whether basil loves tomatoes or vice versa.
All right, that sounds awesome. And for all of our attendees out there, if you have questions for any of our panelists or maybe for someone who's not on tonight, you can put those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen if you're on desktop. If you're on mobile, you might have to hunt around a little bit more for that Q&A box. Also, keep an eye on the chat. We'll be posting things like the links for our garden hour sign up, the contact information for the garden hotlines, and we'll also throw in there the links for the garden and yard newsletter, as well as our problems and solution page. So the chat is for information for folks watching, and the Q&A, throw your questions in there, and I will make sure they get either asked to our specialists or passed along. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. John Ball.
All right, well, thank you. Here, I'll get my presentation started as we always do. Come on, presentation. There we go. All right. Well, we'll start out with my usual, where are we with the season? And this is our growing degree days, which is a great way to take a look at plant development and insect development, as Amanda can chat about, because they're all very temperature sensitive. And so they tend to follow. Things bloom at certain time periods. And where we're at right now is Aberdeen is catching up. They've at least crossed that 300 degree days. Rapid City is kind of slowed a little bit in the last week. And then Sioux Falls is at about 523. And so we're a little behind, just a little behind in eastern South Dakota or southeastern South Dakota in growing degree days. And lilacs tend to start blooming over a fairly long time period. And so you're going to see lilacs in bloom just about anywhere you are in the state. And I took this picture in Mobridge a couple of days ago, and this is a sensation lilac. I love it. I mean, isn't that pretty? And of course, it has the fragrance of common lilac, which we're all like, or most of us like. It can be a little thick, I realize, but again, a beautiful plant, and again, one you might want to consider if you're looking to put a big shrub in your yard. It's going to get about 8 feet, but it's tough as nails. Well, the other thing is at about 550 degree days. So when I'm talking with you next week, we'll have already passed that in Sioux Falls. And by then, the black locust will be in bloom. And why, that's not all that important in itself. A lot of people don't plant black locust, though it's kind of a nice tree and does have a fragrant flower. But it blooms at about 550, which is when emerald ash borer starts to emerge and begins to fly. And so this weekend, when I was down doing our weekly sampling, there's one of the pupae that I pulled out of its pupae chamber. And of course, it's rather surprised by that. But it overwinters in that little cell there that the larvae actually carve out in the fall. And then in the wintertime, it curls up in there kind of like a cat. And then in May, it starts to form a pupae. And this one is now having those dark eye covers there, and otherwise, though, has a few features of emerald ash borer. And so I found a few of these, but I also found these. Now, there's the pupae on the corner there, but I was also able to find adults. Now, they were sitting beneath the bark, All right, so just beneath the bark, and they're ready to chew their way out and emerge. And again, it's getting warm enough, they're going to start pretty quick here. In fact, I'm figuring they're going to start flying sometime later this week. I mean, we're going to have a cool week, but we'll hit 550 rather quickly. And so usually we see Memorial Day as the beginning of the flight period of this insect somewhere out there. Now, here's the other scary thing for everybody watching this. You can see my knife there at the tip there, and it's not a big knife. So you can take a look at the size of the blade, and the insects aren't that big. They're about a half an inch. But look at this piece of wood. It's not much bigger than that, is it? Well, here's the interesting thing. I was cutting samples and I cut this little piece. I mean, it wasn't that big. And I thought, okay, this is an extra. What do I do? And I thought, oh, well, let's just break it open. So I broke it open, and in there were these 3 insects. So think of that. If someone just takes a little chunk of ash wood, something that may be 2 inches in diameter, 2 inches long, that small, and have it in the back of their pickup truck or something like that, and they drive to Mitchell and toss it out, well, boom, we just moved emerald ash borer. So you know the rule. In Sioux Falls, you cannot remove or prune ash trees from now till Labor Day. And the reason for that is they don't want you moving the insect around in the city. And for everybody, you cannot move hardwood, firewood, or ash lumber. By that, raw lumber, not seasoned boards, out of Lincoln, Minnehaha, or Turner County at any time of the year. And you might say, well, why all hardwoods? Well, because most people can't identify an oak from an ash from a maple. So let's just say no hardwoods. But that's how it's going to move around. And so hopefully people will not move firewood. But unfortunately, people do. All right, well, let's take a look at the next. Oh, here's what you all get to look for one of these days. This weekend, Saturday, as I was doing my sampling, I was down in Canton, South Dakota, where we did confirm EAB 2 years ago. And if you go through Canton right now, it looks pretty bad. There are whole streets of ash that look like this. I mean, there's 2 trees that certainly have been infested for about 3 years. And you can see they're sprouting and they have a lot of that blonding. And if you look close, by that, closer than you can see in this picture, you'll find the woodpecker drills in it. But there is street after street of this. So if they leave these trees, and they're just going to die here pretty quick. And then, of course, they deteriorate and start falling. You don't quite get to see this in Sioux Falls. Reason being, the city of Sioux Falls has been very aggressive at removing ash from the street, infested or not, so they can avoid that problem of falling trees. But smaller communities are going to have a struggle with that because they just don't have the resources. So if you want to get an idea what your community might look like one of these days, drive through Canton this year or next, and you'll easily see trees that have been infested by emerald ash borer. Well, you know, there's a good thing about emerald ash borer. I know that's hard to say. What's good about it? Well, if you have tree pollen allergies, it's a plus. Ash used to be about 1/3 to almost 40% of the trees in Sioux Falls. That number is dropping dramatically, either because they were infested or people are just removing them just because they don't want to deal with the borer. And people that are allergic to ash pollen, because it's wind pollinated and it has male flowers, which release the pollen, of course, have noticed their allergies have actually been reduced because we've eliminated ash. And we've planted a lot of ash that were males in Sioux Falls because nobody wanted to deal with the seeds. And so we planted a lot of trees out there that like to produce a lot of pollen. And so the fact that emerald ash borer is eliminating this tree is going to reduce our pollen. So let's just spend a minute on this because I looked it up and our pollen count's pretty high for trees right now. And so let me give you the 2 bad ones out there. One is mulberry. And in fact, some areas where they have a lot of mulberry, they are a real sneeze generator. But right now, the mulberries are in bloom. And of course, they have male staminate flowers and pistillate flowers on separate plants, so they're dioecious. And the males are producing the pollen right now. And if you are sensitive to it, you may be sneezing. And the other one, of course, is the bur oak and all our oaks. They are wind pollinated as well. And so their pollen's out right now. And they're another tree that you may be sneezing at. Now, interesting enough, lilacs are in bloom at the same time. And so a lot of people see the lilacs in flower, say, I'm allergic to lilacs. No, you're not. As I mentioned before, that produces pretty big pollen. It expects an insect to carry it. And the only way you're going to get that is if you're running around sticking your nose right in the flower. It's going to look funny too, but they're kind of like a Post-it note. So you may react to the fragrance. Some people really are, I won't say allergic, but really the fragrance of lilacs doesn't do well for them. But you're actually sneezing because of the oaks and the mulberries and a couple of other trees, and ash in areas where we still have a lot of it. All right, what else is going on out there? Well, winter injury. We're still seeing winter. And it was a dry winter. And it wasn't an exceptionally cold winter, but it was a dry winter and a long winter. And the arborvitae are just brown just about everywhere. I mean, look at this winter burn. And the common thing is people say, well, it didn't. I'll say, well, that's winter burn. And they'll say, no, it can't be. It just did that. Well, you know what? That Christmas tree that I tossed out in the backyard just started to turn brown, and it didn't have any roots. So again, this is just winter desiccation injury. It didn't get a lot of water because they went in the winter dry, and it was kind of a hard winter for them because it was warm. And so they lost what moisture they had, and they browned out. The best thing you do is shear them out, though the ones in the background there, you might as well cut them out. They're not coming back. And then we're actually seeing frost injury too. We had enough days in May. We actually had some warm weather, not much, but it was enough to start pushing development. And then what happened is the new leaves were very tender. And so I'm seeing a lot of browning foliage out there as on this ash tree. And you'd think ash is pretty tough. Well, it isn't for that couple of days the leaves are coming out. And this one just got nipped by that frost. And then the other one, seeing a lot of, I mean, people are calling me. Their tree lilacs look like this. And they're going, oh my gosh, what disease is affecting this tree? It's called South Dakota winter. And there's no spray for that except going to Arizona. If you look at the branches there, they don't have any leaves on them. If you scrape it away, it's still green underneath. The buds are good. They're just being very slow and opening up the buds. And I've seen this before. And sometimes it takes to the middle of June before all the leaves open on these trees. So just have patience. And the leaves that are coming out look like this. And people go, well, what insect has been feeding on my tree lilac? Nothing. What happened is individual cells in the buds were killed by the cold. And so as the leaf opens and that part of it is dead, that leaves you with holes in this tattered margin. So the leaves are going to come out, but they are going to look pretty poor this year. And again, we can blame winter for this. I might mention I'm getting a lot of calls on maples looking very thin this year and elms looking very thin. And the reason for that is they had one heck of a seed crop this year. And all that area on the twig that normally would have leaves had seeds instead, and flowers and seeds. And so right now, as the seeds are dropping in that, the trees look very, very thin. Now, more buds will open and they'll thicken up a little this year, but this is the year where you're going to find fairly open elms and maples, and it's because of the incredibly large seed crop they're having this year. And they do that periodically, and this happened to be the year. So once again, just water the trees, and that's about as good as it gets. Just expect it. For all our West River and Black Hills viewers, I was out there working last week too in my weekly let's go around the whole state. And boy, are the pine engraver beetles, what often referred to as Ips beetles. They're out. Now, the adults overwinter in just the duff layer on the ground, some under the bark of infested trees. But now they've moved out to wherever they're overwintering, and they're burrowing into any slash, any fresh down material, which is what they like to attack. They have to have something that's still green. So they're young, the larvae have something to feed on. If it's dead, I mean, it's dried out, there's nothing for them to eat. They don't usually like to attack trees because trees have a defense called sap and will push these beetles out. So they go for anything green that's down. And you'll see all this little boring dust on any down wood, whether it was purposely cut and left down, a slash, or just a branch fell. And if you pull the bark away, right now you'll see those characteristic kind of Y-shaped galleries. They kind of meet in the middle, and then every one of the females goes out in her own direction and then starts laying eggs along the side. And those eggs are going to start hatching about next week. And then their larvae will feed in there in about another 45 days from now. The new adults will come out. And that's where the problem begins. Because you see that slash pile there. If that's green till the end, 40 days from now, so the larvae are able to finish their development and the adults emerge, but the pile then is too dry for them to attack again, the only place they may be able to go is to these trees. And if we're still in a drought, so these trees are stressed and are not able to produce enough pitch to defend themselves, they can kill trees in the summer. And if you look around the hills and you see these little areas of dead pines, it's not due to mountain pine beetle. It's due to our pine engraver beetle. And so managing slash is very important. Don't put down green material right now unless you plan on putting down green material the entire summer, because once that green change stops, these will move on to trees. And that's why we recommend going out there and doing your thinnings. And if you're leaving slash in the ground, to do that in the fall, try to get it done by January so it dries out before the beetles can use it as a home. Well, what else is going on? We got spring defoliators out there, and the tent caterpillars are going crazy. I find them more in the central part of the state, and on choke cherry, they're very common. They're at this time of the year, they're kind of wandering out of their house, that cotton candy, and they're feeding on the leaves, and then they crawl back into it. So it's a good place to hide. Nobody can attack you when you're in this stuff. There's a lot of insects that like to lay eggs on them, and they can't because they're in this. Birds can't get to them. So they kind of go out during the day, and then they come back in at night. And eventually they're going to stay out there. But, you know, right now, an easy way to kill them is just stick up a sharp or a long pole with some nails into it, into the stuff like cotton candy, and then just twist it and yank it out. Now the larvae have nowhere to hide, and everybody's going to munch on them. So, and don't burn these nests. I've seen that go horribly wrong. So right now, use the easy trick. Think of them as cotton candy. Just stick a stick in there and twirl around and yank it out. You'll kill a lot of the larvae right there. And then finally, my teaser. Why did you pay attention to me this long? Look at this. Spice bouquet Korean lilac. Oh my gosh, what a plant. And I took that picture in Mobridge. Now, Mobridge is warmer than people think. It's not quite a zone 5, but it's not the frozen tundra of the north, not like Britain. So we can grow a few things there that you can't in other areas of the north. But Korean viburnum is a wonderful plant, a plant that I miss when I lived in Michigan and Maine and Massachusetts, because it's one of our most fragrant viburnums. It's a gorgeous plant, beautiful flowers. And this one is considered hardy enough to try in many areas of South Dakota. Now, I would just buy one as an experiment because it may not prove to be as hardy as people think. But I've been very impressed with this one, Spice Bouquet. Now, by the way, it's out of the, and I don't make up these names, it's out of their Spice Girls series. So I don't know. I'm not a big fan of them, or wasn't. But nevertheless, the Spice Girls, if you will, is the series of them. So they'll have spice in the name. But the plant, at least, is pretty nice. And the flowers, I mean, I hate to say this as a reason for flowers looking nice, but they almost look plastic. I mean, they're that perfect. And the fragrance, oh my goodness, are they fragrant? So I'll end with that. I'll end with a high note, and that is, here's a plant you may want to experiment with, unless you're in Yankton, and then it's a dependable grower. But we haven't had a lot of Korean viburnums we could use in our gardens, and this is one. that we might be able to use. And quite honestly, the Korean viburnums are some of the nicest viburnums out there. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Rhoda.
There's my mute. Before we take it to Rhoda, though, John, there is a question for you in the Q&A about lilacs. We had somebody write in that 3 years ago, they cut their lilacs back by about a third just after they finished blooming, and they had no flowers for the last 2 years and very few this year. The lilacs are about 30 years old, and they're wondering if they're nearing the end of their life. The leaves did come back, and the plants look very healthy.
Okay, now I'm assuming they're asking me if the plant's near the end of his life, not them, because I'm not a physician. All right. So with that as a note, the first part that made me cringe is they cut them so they were about a third the height. Is that correct? And you're better to cut them all down to about 2 inches. And I know that seems brutal. But that's the way to get them to sprout the best. So if anyone's going to cut their lilacs back, cutting them to about 2 to 3 inches tall is best. And yes, typically they go 2 years without flowering after that. So the third year might be just because you cut them a little high. And so the sprouts are going to be a little bit more succulent. But no, lilacs should live much longer than that. And I would hope that you would see flowers by next year. But 2 years would be absolutely normal to go without blooms after cutting them back severely. 3 years, no, not very common. 4 years, no, I'd be very surprised. I mean, I've cut some back here on campus and they're up to 15 feet in full bloom right now. So just have a little bit more patience.
All right, awesome. Rhoda Burrows, you are up next.
We will get there eventually here. All right, herbs to harvest now. So as you're waiting for some of the summer vegetables to come on, one of the things you can do is start playing with some of the herbs. And these are perennials or seed themselves pretty well. One thing I find is that people confuse catmint and catnip. We're all familiar with catnip, especially for pet owners or cat owners. And we often find that catnip will seed itself in our gardens. It can be aggressive. In mine, it's just more of an occasional plant here or there. It's never gotten runaway weed for me, but just enough to keep my cats happy. Of course, I also harvest it, so that keeps it down too. Whereas catmint is this wonderful perennial plant. It is a mint, but it's not aggressive like many of the mints are. I've had a plant that's barely moved in probably 8 years that I've had it. The leaves look a little different. They're a little bit more gray. They're a little softer, smaller, a little bit more rounded than the catnip. And of course, the flowers on the catmint are these beautiful shade of sort of bluish purple. And once the flowers come out, you'll know what you have for sure. Like many of the perennials, you can cut this back and it'll rebloom. And both catmint and catnip you can use for things like tea. Cats seem to pretty much ignore my catmint, even though they're the same genus but different species. Whereas catnip has a lot of herbal properties that may or may not also be included in the catmint, but catmint makes some pretty good tea. Some other related species are agastache or hyssop, and that has the long spiky flower, usually kind of a blue. There are some reds. And I've got horse mint in here as well. And oregano. And Agastaki will move itself around a little bit, so it's a little bit aggressive, but not bad. Oregano, I found, is pretty much trying to take over my backyard. I could probably just use it as a ground cover because it fills in pretty well. So beware of oregano. That was one that I've not heard about being so aggressive, but it's even seeding itself into my lawn. So be careful with it. But again, great herb plant. For your best flavor, you want to pick any of these before they start flowering. That's when those chemicals that give it the best flavor are at their strongest. Once they start flowering, often herbs pick up a little bit more of a tannin taste to it, and can also become more tough. So you want to pick them now before you see those flowers. And you can dry them the traditional way, of course, is to dry them in loose bunches hanging from a rafter in your garage or shed or wherever it might be. But another way to do it is in the microwave. And if you've got a pretty powerful microwave, you may need to set the power down to half and strip the leaves off, put them in a dish or a bowl, and microwave it. Try it for a minute or two at first, and then keep doing it until they're nice and crispy, and then they're ready to go. Those of you who are in the Master Gardener training know that I'm always a little bit cautious about talking about companion planting, because to date there haven't been a whole lot of studies verifying what's going on between plants. And we're starting to see a little bit more of those. So I may make this a regular feature in the show, is studies that I've found that verify this or that. Most of them are more on the insect side, but this one I found was not looking at the insects at all. So there was an experiment comparing tomatoes planted alone or with basil or with peppermint or hyssop, which are all in the same plant family. So they wanted to see if that made a difference or not. And their results were increased tomato growth with any of the three companions versus with another tomato. With basil, and they did not check the hyssop and the peppermint, but with the basil, they found out that the tomatoes in their leaves actually had increased flavonoids, which can lead to increased stress tolerance for the tomato. It also increased shikimic acid, and that may increase the soluble sugar and lycopene in the fruit. So those are things that would increase the fruit flavor. So yes, you may indeed actually get better flavored tomatoes if you interplant with basil. So that's one up on a companion planting partnership. And then I want to just leave you with this. I'm just watching the temperatures each week. We're back up and above where we were, except in the northwest corner of the state. If you're up in Buffalo or Bison, you might not want to be planting your warm season crops yet, but pretty much for the rest of the state, we're pretty good to go. And with that, I will stop sharing.
So we've got questions in the Q&A, one for each of you. We'll start with Rhoda. There's a question about how do you kill an aggressive mint plant in a flower bed?
That's with a lot of repeated work. Now that we've lost Roundup, we can't just use Roundup. You might be able to do the same thing with 2,4-D, where you actually put it on a glove or something to wipe on the individual But you want to be real careful doing that, because if it gets windy before it gets dry, it can rub on other plants. Otherwise, it's just coming back. Either take out the whole flower bed and replant what you like, but otherwise it's just keep coming back and taking out the mint. And eventually, if you know, you don't have a whole lot else going on in your life and you spend a lot of time out there pulling mint, you will eventually bring it to the point where it gives up. But
yeah, that's when people get excited about planting mint, we usually tell them to make sure you either plant it in a container first and make sure that container that the roots can't get into the ground. I tend to let mint go in places in my yard where nothing else really wants to grow. So I've definitely put it in some maybe subpar soil conditions just to see if it will establish and outcompete the bindweed and stuff like that. So it can definitely have a place, but yeah, if it's somewhere where you don't want it to be, you just have to be tenacious.
I have some chocolate mint, which I think is a little less aggressive. And I was hoping it would spread and cover large amounts of my yard, but with the drought the last couple of years, it just kind of struggles. And I noticed there's just a couple plants left now.
Yeah. Yeah, and for John, there was a question about looking for a fast-growing, I'm guessing shrub or scrub suggestions for new underwood.
It might be both.
It could be, okay, a scrubby shrub. I don't know.
Shrub. We're talking new underwood. You don't get to play with a very big box of crayons. New underwood's a place where plants go when they did something bad in a previous life. Its soils are very tough. Climate's very tough. There is no water. Water there is not that good. So it is, in all seriousness, it is a tough place to grow plants. They didn't list a size, but let me give you some of the toughest. And obviously they grow there, they'll grow anywhere else. But your spireas are some of your toughest plants, both in terms of our climate and to our soils. And so if you don't want a very tall plant, any of the Bomolda spireas would do well. They're going to get about 3 feet tall, and they're summer bloomers. With the nice thing with the summer blooming plants, if you cut them to the ground, they'll sprout right back. And then another one is our snowberries. Now, when you think of snowberries, you might think of some of the wolfberries and that are native out there. But we have some snowberries out now that just have spectacular fruit, and it is white and fairly large, but it's a plant that really has been discovered recently. And so you might want to consider going to a garden center and taking a look at some of the snowberries or the red snowberries that are now available. They're hybrids, and those are fairly tough plants as well. And then, of course, the other one that I see do very well out there is the buffalo berry. And that it's going to be a taller plant that's going to get to your 5-6 foot range. But those are some of the toughest plants you could use out in that area.
Awesome. So there are some things that can handle new underwood.
Not a lot.
All right. I am going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint here. I don't think I started with blister beetles, but I guess I did. All right, here we go. And for folks, if you've got questions for any of us, feel free to throw those in the Q&A. I'm gonna go over just some cool insects that I got to see over the weekend. I did a field day in Standing Butte at the Standing Butte Ranch, which is northwest of Pierre by about 30-ish miles. It's off of 1806 for folks who might be familiar with that area. But I had a lot of time to kill and an insect net and a bug dorm while I was waiting for the tour group to kind of make it around to my station. And so I just kept catching things for like hours on Saturday afternoon. And one of the first things that I picked up was actually a blister beetle. And this blister beetle is not the gray blister beetle that I usually more commonly see, like in towns and in alfalfa fields and stuff, but this is a different genus of blister beetle. And how blister beetles get their name is that they have cantharidin in their insect blood that they will ooze as a defense when handled or crushed or whatever. So if you run across a beetle that has a fairly large abdomen and a skinny thorax, so the sort of the main distinguishing feature is that the thorax, that middle segment where the legs attach and where the wings attach, is actually skinnier than both the head and the thorax, or both the head and the abdomen. So that's what's sort of distinctive about the blister beetle shape. If you do run across them, like, don't freak out unless you're a horse. Horses that ingest blister beetles can have a bad time of it. So that's why people who grow alfalfa kind of pay attention to blister beetle populations. The blister beetle larvae actually do predate on grasshopper eggs. So a lot of people ask me, like, what good is this insect? Well, during part of its life cycle, it helps to keep our grasshoppers maybe a little bit more in check. So blister beetles, aren't all bad. I am the person who will, catch insects by hand and let them walk on me. I have yet to have a blister beetle ooze on me and cause the rash, but I did have a friend who accidentally squished one in his pants leg. So, felt something crawling on him, smacked first, asked questions later, and it was a blister beetle and he got a blister from it. So that's why I sort of, I try to like tamp down that reflex if I feel something crawling on me to like smash it, because that's when, sometimes bad things can happen. But blister beetles are starting to be out and about. I also got to see dung beetles, which was possibly one of the coolest things ever. We were on a bison ranch, and on Friday when we were scouting, we did get to go like into the area where the bison were hanging out, which was awesome. And we got to take some shovels to some bison, dung patties of varying ages to see what was inside them. And let me tell you, it was like cracking open like a Kinder Surprise egg when you like flip the top off of the like slightly aged dung patty to see like what's crawling around in there. And this was my first time getting to sort of like handle dung beetles. I did vegetable pest entomology in grad school, so dung beetles were not a thing that was super on my radar. But look at how adorable these guys are. Like the cool little antennae, like the little tiny arm, they were surprisingly strong. Like this guy like was continually trying to get out of my grasp. And he's one of the rollers that take like the dung balls and like roll them away. So this is one of our larger dung beetles. You can see he's like almost the size of my thumbnail. But a lot of people, want dung beetles to be around, if they've got pasture, they've got, large animals, but certain, veterinary like treatments that, insecticides and stuff that stay in the animal can inhibit dung beetle populations, because they then persist in the waste of the animal. And then anything that tries to eat that is gonna, not have a great time of it. So in order to have dung beetles, you do have to kind of change the way you manage livestock so that you don't have those insecticides hanging out sort of throughout the carbon cycle. But I got to play with dung beetles, and I think some of the people there were a little bit surprised at how cool my colleagues and I found the dung beetles. And then I also just wanted to touch briefly on ants. I get a lot of ant questions during the summer, especially as we're kicking off more time outside. A lot of people really want to kill ants, and it's usually going to be a losing battle. So these are some ants that live outside the Oahe Downstream pollinator garden, and they're there every year without fail. Every year around the time that we do our big outreach event, somebody sprays them. Every year they come right back. So ants are some of our social hymenopterans. They're in the same order as your bees and your wasps. Like honeybees, they have a colony. There's a queen. The workers all have roles. It is a finely tuned system. And a lot of times the ants that we have outside, especially some of the bigger ones like our mound builders, when their nests are disturbed, instead of just deciding to pack up and move, they will actually split into two colonies. So it's kind of like cutting off the head of a hydra. You're just going to end up with more. So I definitely recommend that if you've got an ant mound situation outside, that you don't mess with it because you're just going to make it worse for yourself. We had a couple of, at this point, quite a few years ago, it was like 2015-ish, I think. But we were scouting pastures for damage from June beetle grubs. And there was one pasture that we scouted that had a ton of, I think it was like an Allegheny mound ant. And there were no grubs in that pasture, like tons of ant hills and no grubs because ants in the soil will, they will pick up plant seeds, they will eat other arthropods, they're omnivorous. So we kind of, we weren't able to sort of do like a study on it or anything, but we kind of speculated, all these pastures that we scouted that maybe the presence of ants had something to do with the lack of grubs. So you're not going to win against ants. If they are coming inside your house, that's where you can target your defense measures so that they're no longer coming inside your house. One thing some people don't realize with ants is that they can be attracted to different kinds of food. There are some ants that are going to strongly prefer sugar and sweet things. And then there's some ants that are going to strongly prefer like proteins, oils, and fats. And so if you're seeing ants in your house and you're noticing that they're going towards, something in your kitchen, you want to pay close attention to what it is that they're going to, because that's going to inform what kind of bait you choose to use for them. And then also before you, squish the ants, you can follow them and see where they're coming in from, because ants will, leave a pheromone trail so that other ants can follow them. And so you can like let the ant help you, and follow it and see if you can pinpoint, where it's getting into the house. Because then you can also maybe, patch up that window or, put some more weather stripping on that door or something else to help be a physical barrier. But if you do have ants coming in, you want to see where they're going, see what they're eating, and then choose, choose your bait appropriately. I had ants a couple of years ago that would come in and they would go straight for the cat food. So I knew that I needed to pick a bait that was more that protein and fat based versus one that was for, ants that were going to go after sugar. And that made a really big difference. For things, I know a lot of people freak out about carpenter ants. Carpenter ants don't eat wood like termites eat wood, but they do excavate decaying wood. So they are sort of an indicator of a different issue than perhaps termites would be. Carpenter ants can also make it into the house using like bridges. So if you've got any branches or shrubs that are touching the house, carpenter ants can use those to kind of walk across. And they can have satellite nests. So, their main nest can be like somewhere out in the environment, and there could be a satellite nest that is like in or near a structure like a house or a garage. So the world of ants is vast, and they will win. So it's important to temper your expectations when working on an ant problem. But just do know, they're out there. Lots of things also eat them. They're small, they're tiny. There's a lot of them. But they also do, provide some interesting ecosystem services out there in the garden. And also, the more you disturb them, the more satellite colonies are going to be perhaps making your life even more difficult. You can have a colony of, pavement ants or, turf ants that, take up an entire city block. They're all related, all connected. So there's really no way short of like a nuclear, war that you're going to get rid of them. So don't want people out there fighting losing battles and throwing a bunch of insecticide out there that's not really going to do anything useful. So that's my spiel on ants. As you can probably all tell, I'm generally, like team whatever the insect is, but especially with those ants, I get a lot of questions on them. So that's what we've got for slides, but if folks have any questions or if any of my other panelists have any points of contention or discussion, we do have a few minutes before our normal end time.
Well, this is John. I'll just chime in. First of all, anyone who spends their weekend going through poop and then actually tries to figure out why ants are feeding on their cat food needs to have a life. But having said that, let me chime in on your carpenter ant, because you're right. I get a lot of those too, particularly with these recent storms that dropped a lot of trees. And I got a call today. They found the ants in the tree. And I said, well, what was the interior of the tree like? And they said, well, it was almost a powder. And, well, what do we spray for these ants? I said, nothing. The ants are taking advantage of that rotted wood to create a home. They're not the reason that it's rotted, but I know you deal with household pests, which I would consider your cat, but the carpenter ants, yes, we find them in trees, and I'm surprised at how many people try to go spray for them when in fact, there's no really need to do so. They're actually doing you a favor, letting you know that tree has been compromised. You may want to consider removing it.
Yeah, the people, and a lot of times I know, John, you and I, get questions and pictures from people where they see an insect on a plant or especially a tree. The tree is declining and they're like, why did this insect kill this tree? And it's like, this insect just landed there.
Yeah, that'd be the equivalent of, well, my son's car got hit by that hail, and if I find an insect on his dimpled car, the reason the car was dimpled was because of this insect. But there's a lot of insects that are just kind of wandering through. That in the way we look at things as having to be good or bad, they're really neither. They're there doing their role that they need to do. And we just happened to spot them at the time. And so while we do certainly have some very serious insect problems out there in many of our plants that we want, don't jump to conclusions. And if you see something, decide that it needs to be treated. Or actually the fallback for me, which I will mention right now, is spider mites. Everyone that has a declining spruce figures spider mites are doing it. And what do they spray? No, spider mites are rarely the problem. I'm not saying never the problem. We do have them, but let's not always look for a chemical solution.
Yep, we got a question in the chat about emerald ash borer treatment. When is it time to treat ash trees for EAB, and what questions should a homeowner ask to make sure they're getting a competent and effective treatment?
Both good questions. Let's start out with the basics, and that is, if you do not live in Minnehaha or Lincoln County or within 15 miles of an infestation, you don't need to treat. It would be premature. And yes, we never find the first insect in a community, but I'll also tell you that if a tree is infested, let's say we find it in your town and we come by, your tree is one that's already infested. The infestation at that time will be so light, the injections can restore the tree. So there's no value in going out and treating prematurely. I know people in Rapid City that are even treating for it, and that's really premature. The other thing is, if you do live in Lincoln or Minnehaha County, one of the places I would go to look as to who to hire would be to go to the City of Sioux Falls Forestry website, and they do maintain a list of applicators for the City of Sioux Falls. Now, by the way, you can hire those people for Canton, another area that certainly has an established population, or Crooks, or one of the other communities, but those people have the insurance, which I think is still important. And they have some knowledge of the insect and treatments beyond having our commercial pesticide applicators license. And so that's the list I would go to and, talk to several people. There's a wide variety of treatments that can be used. Almost all of them are injected into the tree. While there are treatments that are being injected into the soil, I'm sure Amanda would have some disagreement with using those because they can get into other plants, and I would agree with her. And so we're not suggesting those at all. Put the chemical right into the tree. And when I say put the chemical in, hire someone to do it. The products that you can buy off the store shelves really don't work on trees that are very large. And so the only way to do it is to hire someone. If you hire someone and they do everything right, going from the list, you should get that. You're going to find that you have about a 99% chance of success. Some trees will die regardless. But I've been in communities, the only trees that are left are those that were treated properly. So use that list, talk to a couple of people, see who you're most comfortable with, see who gives you the best price, not necessarily the lowest price, and have it treated this month if you're in the area.
All right, let's see. I know I typed an answer to a question about glyphosate, someone asking if it had been banned, and it's not banned per se, but Bayer is essentially removing it from homeowner use. So it's going to be sort of less available over the next couple of years. It may still be available for certain applications, but it's getting sort of pulled from the lawn and garden shelves. And it's also important to note that referring to something as Roundup, Roundup is a trade name at this point, and glyphosate is the chemical name of the product that is going to be less available. Roundup, you're still going to see bottles labeled Roundup on store shelves because that is a trade name, but you're going to want to look at the ingredients on that label. It's going to be something other than glyphosate. And I believe Paul Johnson talked about that last week. So you can also check out the recording on our YouTube channel if you missed Paul Johnson's week. And I'm going to throw in the chat our problems and solutions page where you can submit questions to us anytime. And we may use them as some fodder for future either newsletter articles or future garden hours when we're looking at what we should be putting together in our slides every week. And I know we don't have to go until 8 o'clock. If anyone has any last minute questions, you are free to throw those in the Q&A for us. Rhoda, do you have any sort of parting advice, last thoughts about mint or cats?
I was regretting I didn't have a cute cat picture to put on there, but I did notice the comment about putting coffee grounds around your foundation that hopefully act as a repellent. I would suggest putting coffee grounds in your compost and mixing it well with more of a dry material because coffee grounds are actually quite high in nitrogen. So they're a good source for feedstock for your compost.
Yeah, I've been putting my coffee grounds in my compost. So I've got an area that definitely I need to turn at some point, but my compost piles have gotten large and slightly unmanageable.
I found my Norway maple roots, found my compost pile and loved it.
Nice. Let's see. All right, the question about Treflan for pre-emerge in a vegetable garden, we're gonna have to get back to you on that one.
Only if you don't plan to plant any seed.
Oh yeah.
To start with. But it can also do some damage to young seedlings that you transplant.
And let me jump in on that too, because I've seen where people have used it like a salt shaker and put a lot on it and actually stunted newly planted, 1 gallon shrubs. So I guess we'll also remind everybody that the most common extension statement: read and follow label directions and do not exceed rates. Even these that seem to be relatively mild or harmless can be killers if you add a lot. I mean, literally, they were using it like a salt shaker, and it stunted those trees. And
I'm speaking next week, and I was going to do some garden bug things, but I don't know. Maybe I should do a pesticide safety thing.
You know what? It would not be a bad idea because we do still have this. I bought this bottle. Let's use it up. And by the way, could you touch upon how you dispose of the empty bottle next week?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So next week we'll be talking about some home pesticide safety tips because that is apparently what we need. And let's see. A question just came in about the giant Duro spiders. Don't worry about the Duro spiders, guys. Sensationalist news article about something with 8 legs. They exist in the southeastern United States. Some grad student did a study, saw that they could, exist farther north than previously determined. They are not going to eat your face. It is fine. We don't have them in South Dakota. We have other large, very cool orb weavers. We don't have the Doro spider. If we did, it would be fine here too.
Wait a minute. Now you got me frightened. I had not heard of this. What is it? It jumps on your face at night while
No,
you're
it doesn't. But everyone's like, much like the giant Asian hornets, people see a large sort of colorful insect, or in this case, arthropod, and think that it's going to take over the world. It's not.
Okay. All right. I was just thinking of the scene out of Alien.
Right. Yeah. So.
I mean, you've already frightened me with this tick that'll stop me from eating at Five Guys.
Right.
It's just like, man, we don't want to have you on this show anymore. There's always something out there that's going to ruin my life.
Wear your repellent, read the label. You'll be fine.
Now, for anyone who just turned in and said, oh my gosh, I can't eat a cheeseburger because of a tick. These have been found in South Dakota, is that correct?
Yes. So it's the Lone Star tick, and it vectors the alpha-gal protein. And that alpha-gal is what can make you allergic to red meat. So it's not allergic to all meat, it's just allergic to like cow. You can still eat like fish and poultry, but just not beef. So wear your repellent, check for ticks after you've been pretty much anywhere in South Dakota. The Lone Star tick is the sort of range is that southeastern corner of the state. So those of you out in the hills or, Lemon, which I don't even think exists, you guys don't have to worry yet. But, every tick we have in the state of South Dakota can vector at least one disease. Black-legged ticks and Lyme's disease are not the only tick vector disease that people need to be aware of.
All right. Why don't we end on that note? Because that's
right,
pretty
ending
depressing.
on a high note. But thank you to our panelists, Dr. Rhoda Burrows and Dr. John Ball, for joining us this evening for Garden Hour. We will be back next week. Same time, same place on Zoom. The recordings are up on YouTube. If you miss us, feel free to submit questions to any of us during the week through the problems and solutions page. That Ask Extension widget ends up going to all of us, or you can also email us or the garden hotline. But thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.